Yesterday I had a chance to attend Dave Cornelius' presentation and really enjoyed Dave's overview and getting practical of how to implement service management and his example of software asset management. He covered some principles of ITIL and then some practical steps on how to actually implement it in an interesting and entertaining format, and he clearly has got a lot of expertise. I enjoyed it.
The first phase, which is to evaluate, is you're going to have participants from, you're going to have a project manager, you're going to have a project consultant, you're going to have the executives involved, and you're going to have your management team. So when you guys walk in, at least some of you, when you walked in the room today, what I did was give you a piece of paper. So I will call out the label on top of those little boxes, and I'll ask you to read them. And the reason is, the first thing that you want to do for your evaluate process is conduct an interview, right? We're going to have some strategic questions and work with members of our organization to really understand what's going on. Because really, you may or may not know, and you won't know all the details of the answers. So, survey, if you could find a little slip of paper, and if you have survey question 1, would you read that, please?
Can you identify the key stakeholders impacted by this change?
And if that question was pointed to me, I would say, of course, the people that needs to be involved in this is that we have to make sure our finance team is involved. And we have to get procurement, because we're doing software asset management. We want to make sure our IT people are engaged as just 3 different key stakeholders as part of this process. We'll also talk about our external vendors, that they are also critical stakeholders in this. Now, survey question number 2. Someone has survey question number 2? Please read, please.
What are the specific strategic goals that you are want to accomplish by implementing the process?
Well, the strategic goal is that we want to reduce costs. We want to reduce risk. Right now, our price is escalating from $500,000 over to $2 million annually. One of my strategic goals is to make sure we get that down to 0. And we want to do that within a 1-year period. Survey question number 3. Go ahead.
Oh, mine's procurement.
Please describe the roadmap and any planning that is currently underway.
Well, at this time, we don't have a roadmap, and we have no planning in place. This is why we're failing so terribly in terms of our costs. So, and same thing for survey question number 4.
Hey Dave, what do you consider key opportunities and challenges?
Well, as you could see, risk mitigation is one of my biggest challenges. One of the great opportunities is that we have the ability, an option to now put into place some processes that allows us to control how we acquire software, all the way until we retire software. We will know end to end through the life cycle how things work. And actually put the appropriate solutions in place to help that. Survey question number 5.
How do you plan on to address challenges and constraints?
At this time, I don't know. I will really reach out to the team and ask them for help to ensure that we could do a much better job of managing our constraints. We'll put a risk mitigation process in place so we could identify that. But this is part of your implementation strategy. When you go to evaluate, you've set up a series of questions that you go in and you meet with these individuals, the various stakeholders, and you ask them these questions. You don't send out a survey, but you have a sit-down interview so you could capture that information and really gather that information. So from a strategic perspective, beyond that, also is that if this was incident, I would be talking about incident practices as opposed to SAM. Right? And if there was another process that I was looking to implement, I would use that in place of SAM. So right now we're talking about software asset management, so we're talking about SAM technologies. We know that our procurement and contract management team is a part of this process, so we want to evaluate those guys and have interviews with them as well. Your financial team, you want to understand how their process works as it fits in for doing software asset management. ERP systems, right? You're going to have, if you have your financial team, you know you're going to have some type of, whether it's PeopleSoft or some other product that you will be using to help with your ERP process. And finally, it's really, do you have any other ITSM processes that you've already implemented within the organization, right? And you want to take a look at that. Now, after you've gone through the whole process of interviewing, looking at artifacts, right? You're really trying to understand the organization. Now you're going to come back and say, well, this is what ITIL tells me that I have to do to implement software asset management. It said, here's the best practices. It says I have to have some overall management processes so that I could really manage and govern what goes on within the organization when it deals with software. I have to also have some critical software asset processes that deals with what is the life cycle? How does this really work? And as you implement software or you disperse it through the organization, from the time that someone says, I need 1,000 licenses of Microsoft Office, what does that really look like? How do we go through and define that and make sure that we can procure it and deploy it? Right, and do optimization, because if I buy 1,000 licenses and all of a sudden I'm up to 1,200 people, if I didn't negotiate for those additional 200 licenses, I'm in trouble, right? And if my company is growing faster and people are leaving and I'm not tracking all the way through the life cycle, then I'm going to have a lot of problems at the end of the year. And there are a lot of, trust me, there's lots and lots of companies out there who have these scenarios. And finally, you have to verify. Audit what's going on within the organization. So after you've reviewed all of these documents, you've gone through and mapped against your process, let's see how mature our organization is. I borrowed a model from Microsoft and KPMG, and it's their SAM maturity optimization model. I like this model because it was really simple and it was really easy for the business people to really understand it. I've seen others where a maturity level 1 or 2 or 3, what does that really mean? And the description was very cryptic. So I used something, and this is a model that I've actually used at a customer to really walk them through, where are you? So the very first level is that it's basic, it's ad hoc. You have little or no control over what's going on in your organization from an IT perspective, especially specifically software. No policies, no procedures, right? Poor resources, poor tools. And you can see the migration where you go up to standardize, where most organization fits here in the standardized level, where they do have some processes and they have some tools, right? And they have some repository, even if that repository is Microsoft Excel, right? It's still a repository and it's still something that you could go to, and as you progress through the process, where you want to get to is really being really dynamic, where, you know, SAM is really like an asset to the organization, right? From your strategic perspective, because now I can plan and look at how my organization is growing, right? And really account for that and manage the financial risk associated with that. So besides just having a maturity model, one thing that you have to really focus on is make it purposeful. What does it really mean to be dynamic? Right? What does it really mean to be a maturity level 4? What does this really mean? I'm saying, for example, that, hey, you know, when I'm dynamic, I'm delivering $2 million in annual savings to the organization. What kind of business person get with that? What do you think? Sure, they could connect to that information. And as IT people, we kind of like to keep all the good news as secrets. We don't tell anyone about it, right? We don't tell anyone. Yes. So I said, socialize, you know, this great news to the organization. Work with members from your marketing team. They will be happy to come in and put up a big sign and banners that, hey, we're dynamic, we're saving $2 million annually. Great news, right? These are things that we can do to socialize this part of our organization, what maturity really means for us. Now, finally, we're going to do a gap analysis, right? So we did some interviews, so we understand where things are. We reviewed some artifacts. We looked at our maturity level, and now we mapped that against the industry best practices. Now we have to say, well, what are the gaps? What has happened in our organization, or what is happening in our organization that's really prohibiting us from being dynamic. So I picked a few things that I've ran into, over my career as a consultant. Is that, so as you set up this gap analysis, you have, an idea gap. What's the impact of the organization? How are you going to remediate that? And level of effort. There's nothing like walking into an executive and said, X is wrong. Well, what is this impact? Well, how are you going to fix it? How long does it take? All of these questions. How much does it cost? Part of this process is to make sure that you have clear, succinct information to the executives that you're speaking to. So, lack of executive sponsorship is one thing. And that happens where sometimes we start some of these processes as a grassroots activity, and no one on the top knows about it or cares about it. So this is giving you a way of how to communicate that back to the organization, to say that the impact is that no one knows what the strategy is. What are we doing? And to ensure that we mitigate or remediate this gap is that we want to make sure that we find someone who could really connect across in a cross-functional way. I would say it's going to take us 1.5 months, a month and a half. And the other one is just unidentified governance and accountability. I said 2 months, but I'm dreaming. That's more like 6+ months to really make that work, right? I just put that in there for humor.